Hi, the SI meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, April 9th. Well, here at the SIweather.com, we like to take a look periodically at the solar cycle, number 24, as well as the global sea ice conditions to see what's going on around the world. The northern hemisphere sea ice has been below normal, the southern hemisphere above normal, and we can get an overall look at the global conditions, and we'll take a look at that over the next few minutes. Let's start off here with the latest sea surface temperature anomaly chart around the globe and see what's going on here. There are a few things I want to point out that have a key role in terms of sea ice in the northern and southern hemisphere. First of all, the Atlantic Ocean, especially the northern half of the Atlantic Ocean, is quite a bit above normal, especially like right in this region right here. Notice the oranges and yellows. That represents above normal temperatures. Sea surface temperatures are above normal. The white on this particular type of plot, and such as in this region right here, this region right here, represents the sea ice. So the fact that the temperatures here in the North Atlantic are on the whole above normal certainly has an impact on the sea ice here in the northern hemisphere, and that's one of the main reasons why the sea ice has been running below normal. The fact that the northern Atlantic has had above normal sea surface temperatures. Curiously, down here in the southern Atlantic, it's really starting to change here. There's a colder than normal throughout the southern part of the Atlantic right now. We track the sea surface temperatures through an oscillation index. In the Atlantic, it's called the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, or AMO. In the northern Pacific, there's an index called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or PDO. Now, the Pacific Ocean has had this kind of a horseshoe-shaped below normal temperature pattern here, which is pretty typical of a negative PDO. This is a colder than normal pattern here in the North Pacific, while the AMO, the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, has kind of flipped to a positive or a warm phase back in the mid-90s. Meanwhile, down here in the southern hemisphere, notice this area here, it's white. This is the sea ice. Notice it's surrounded by below normal temperatures right here around the continent of Antarctica. Similarly here, all this white here is sea ice, and most of it is surrounded by colder than normal sea surface temperatures. Again, all this is playing a role in what's going on right now around the world in terms of sea ice. Meanwhile, one other area I just want to point out here, still generally below normal temperatures off the west coast of South America. This is our El Nino, La Nina territory in the tropical Pacific. We have the northern Pacific PDO. We have the AMO for the Atlantic Ocean. Here we have El Nino, La Nina, and right now it's still favoring a weak La Nina or below normal temperatures. You can see some of these darker blues here right off the west coast of South America. Here's the equator right here, this particular latitude line here. So the tropical Pacific is still kind of favoring a weak La Nina conditions. Well, let's jump right into the Northern Hemisphere sea ice anomaly. All this data, by the way, is from the University of Illinois. If you Google University of Illinois cryosphere, you get to this website where they have a very good collection of sea ice anomalies, both northern and southern hemisphere as well as global. Here's the very latest for the northern hemisphere. Still below normal, but actually it's come back quite a bit in the last several weeks. You notice this uptick here in the last several weeks. We are now in the springtime here in the northern hemisphere, approaching the summer, so it'll be interesting to follow, see what happens here again relative to normal. Now notice one other thing I want to point out here. Along about 1995 or so, there was quite a change in the pattern here, and I believe that's related to the AMO we talked about a moment ago. We'll show a chart in a minute. The AMO, the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, flipped from a negative to a positive right around this time in the mid-90s, and since then there's been a below normal trend in sea ice. Before that, it was generally above normal, and again, I think it's very well correlated with the flip in the sign to a positive or a warm Atlantic Ocean back around the mid-90s. But here's another look at the Northern Hemisphere sea ice anomaly condition right now. This is from a Norwegian site where they track this sort of thing. The very red line right here, the end of the red line right here, and I'll just point that out, represents where we are right now in terms of sea ice relative to some of these other years here, going back 6 years or so. back to 2007 to 2013. So we're not in bad shape here, is what I'm trying to point out here in the northern hemisphere. In fact, well above this level. This was 2007. So in the last 5 or 6 years, we're certainly in the middle or even the upper part of the range in terms of sea ice anomaly here in the northern part of the hemisphere. Again, this is a current look at the early part of April. I started talking before about the pretty good correlation between what's going on in the northern hemisphere in terms of sea ice anomaly and the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, or AMO. Here's a plot of the AMO going back many, many years. Now, I want to point out around 1995 or so, right in this region, was this big flip right here from negative to positive, and it's pretty well correlated with what's going on in the northern hemisphere. That's about the same time that the sea ice in the northern hemisphere began to go below normal on a consistent basis, even though it's not too far from this last several years. It's really not doing too badly for this time of the year. But again, it pretty well correlates with the AMO. Now, these kind of oceanic cycles can last for a couple of decades or more, 2 or 3 decades perhaps. So I would expect that when the AMO flips back to a negative phase, perhaps 5, 10, 15 years, that the sea ice in the northern hemisphere will get back to normal or even above normal, similar to what was the case before the mid-90s. Now here's a look at the southern hemisphere sea ice anomaly. Again, this is from the University of Illinois Cryosphere website. Well above normal. Here's the normal line right here, and this is significantly above normal right now. Again, it's the last several weeks it's actually climbed quite a bit, kind of similar to what's going on in the northern hemisphere. And now in the southern hemisphere, of course, they're headed towards winter. Won't be too long before they're headed towards winter, but there's below normal in the northern hemisphere, but well above normal in the southern hemisphere. Let's take a look at how it occurs right now globally. And here is the global sea ice, again from the University of Illinois Cryosphere website. Here's the normal line right here cutting across, and here's the very latest, actually above normal now. Globally speaking, this is combining the northern hemisphere with the southern hemisphere. We're now above normal on a global basis in terms of sea ice anomalies. So periodically we'll update things, just see what's going on here around the world in terms of sea ice, as well as other things like the solar cycle number 24. That's it for now for the SIweather.com. I'm the SI meteorologist, Paul Dorian.